What's up guys, Jake Verdon Tech here, and today we're doing a video that's a little bit overdue. We're going to be talking about my first water-cooled PC. I'm just going to kind of give an overview of performance and mainly going into the details of the parts I chose. So let's jump right into it. So starting off with the case, we are using the Fractal Design Define R6. This is an awesome case. Anything from home media servers, water cooling, and anything in between, this is a great case for. This is probably one of the most versatile cases on the market just because there's so many different options you can do with it, and it's just a real pleasure to build in. There's lots of room.
Look at all this floor space. So much aerobics in here. So many activities.
And everything routes really nice, so it's a great case. Don't have any complaints with it. The only complaint I have, and it's not the case's fault, it's just the parts I chose, is my MAXIMUS 11 formula doesn't quite have enough room to utilize those water-cooled VRMs. So right where my 360 rad is, it kind of runs out of space, and there's really no way to get a fitting in there or any sort of bend to plumb the water cooling components on that motherboard. So that's my only complaint. The Fractal Design Define R6, it's a little bit longer in length and not as tall as other mid-tower ATX cases, and that's kind of what prevented me from using the water-cooled VRMs on that motherboard. But overall, this is a fantastic case and I would definitely recommend it. And that segues us into the motherboard, which is the ASUS ROG MAXIMUS 11 formula. This is a really cool motherboard, and it's kind of one of the, they call it like the case modder SKU. It's one of the more high performance SKUs in the ROG lineup for 9th gen Intel stuff. It is backwards compatible with 8th gen, and I actually utilize that with my i7 8700K. So it is backwards compatible. Really great motherboard. Yeah, so I had a lot of questions about this motherboard before I purchased it. Anything from how vibrant is the RGB lighting. I really like the design of this motherboard. It's beautiful. They got like a really cool, like almost mirrored acrylic on it, and it looks really cool. But I didn't know how bright the RGB lighting was going to be. And then another big question was, if in case that you weren't able to use the water-cooled VRMs, is it okay to run those air-cooled? Those were all questions I had before I purchased the motherboard, and I did a lot of research on it and didn't find any clear answers. So hopefully if you guys are looking at this motherboard, I can kind of clear those things up for you. But in a lot of reviews that I read, the RGB lighting, and from my personal experience now, isn't super vibrant. It's not super bright, and I don't know if it's because of that kind of glass acrylic texture on it. But it's more subtle, but it is noticeable and it looks really cool. I think the design on this motherboard is just phenomenal. And I think that's kind of what can jack up the price a little bit when it comes to this board versus other boards in its lineup and by other brands as well. Now, more importantly, going on to those water-cooled VRMs, my biggest question was, can you run those air-cooled? And I saw a lot of things on Tom's Hardware, I think a few things on Reddit that said, you know, a lot of people said, no, you can't, those are water blocks only. I've seen, from the research I've done, I've seen a lot of builds that have AIOs and they don't plumb them at all. And I've seen a lot of test benches run these, and it's even got an air CPU cooler. So there's a lot of people that run this motherboard without those water-cooled VRMs. And now that I've been running this system for a little bit, I haven't noticed any crazy high temperatures with the motherboard. It all is, you know, pretty average. I think most of the time I see the motherboard temp around 30 to 35 C, which is normal. I didn't notice any freakishly high temperatures with it. But without those water-cooled VRMs, you know, you are going to take a performance loss, especially if you're an overclocker, because that's mainly what those are for. It's mainly to cool those VRMs to give you a little bit more headroom on your CPU overclocks. So overall, you'll probably lose a little bit of headroom when it comes to your overclocks and stuff, but if you're not a serious overclocker, I mean, it'll be fine just running it, you know, without the water-cooled VRMs. So moving on to the CPU, I'm using the Intel i7 8700K. And like I mentioned earlier, this does work with the motherboard we're using because it is backwards compatible with 8th gen Intel CPUs. But overall, the 8700K is a pretty tried and true CPU. I really like it. It's a phenomenal gaming CPU. It just has really good clock speeds. The only downside with the i7-8700K for me is as I started building this PC, my needs have kind of changed over time. When I first started out, I was mostly gaming on it, and I would do some work stuff like programming for school and work and stuff like that. I wasn't really into video editing. I'm doing a lot of video editing these days, and I really enjoy it. And the i7-8700K isn't a great CPU for editing. It just doesn't have quite the cores and the threads when it comes to that very, multi-threaded intensive tasks. It does really good on 1080p footage, 1080p timelines. Even 4K footage is okay, but when you change your timeline to 4K, it can get a little bit, it can start to struggle a little bit. You'll have, some choppy, your preview is a little bit choppy, stuff like that. But I'm still messing with the settings in Adobe Premiere Pro, so there might be a setting I'm missing in there that'll really smooth it out. I have been running proxies. I make sure my RAM utilization is all on Adobe Premiere. But there's a lot of settings in there, so I could still be missing something. For the graphics card, we're using a NVIDIA 1080 Ti, and this is one from EVGA. It's their For the Win 3 edition. I've been running this card in my old system. I ran it air-cooled, and then now it's onto this system, and it's water-cooled. Just been a phenomenal card overall. Just a absolute powerhouse of a graphics card. High frame rates in any game I throw at it. And I am running it on an ultra-wide panel, and that's kind of the reason why I bought this card, because when I bought the ultra-wide, I was running a GTX 1060, and it did run it, but I could tell it was kind of stressing out that graphics card. Just to make sure I was at safe temps while gaming, I would always turn the fan curve up to aggressive. But the 1080 Ti is an absolute powerhouse, so it really pushes those pixels very well on a ultra-wide monitor. For the RAM, I have 32 gigs of the G.Skills Trident Z RGB. It's not the Royal Edition that unfortunately came out shortly after I purchased the regular Trident Z, but still great RAM, looks good, and great with performance, no complaints there. So as far as storage goes, I have 2 terabytes of NVMe storage on this, which is phenomenal. It is some of the fastest storage on the market, and it's pretty much all there is to say about it. Luckily, that motherboard supports 2 M.2 form factor hard drives, and I really wanted to keep this build clean. I didn't really want any 2.5 inch or 3.5 inch drives, just more wires to deal with. So instead I just went with the 2 M.2 format drives. One of them being this Western Digital Black 1 terabyte. That's a great hard drive. And then I have a Samsung 970 EVO, which is another really good one. Both super fast. I don't know if there's really any differences between the two. They're both some of the, top of the line hard drives you can get nowadays. I will say this is the other hard drive I initially purchased. It is a Western Digital Blue 1 terabyte. I wasn't able to use this one because it is a SATA interface, and those other two are a PCIe interface. So this motherboard, I think one of the slots can take SATA interface, but it is slot 1, and I wanted slot 1 to have my operating system, and that's basically how I've divided up these 2 hard drives. I have one for my OS and software, and then the other one's going to be for games, mostly for games. I don't know if I'm going to put anything else on it, maybe a few documents, trying to keep it clean as possible. But that is one thing to note if you are purchasing this motherboard and you want to do the 2 M.2 form factor hard drives, is make sure that slot 1 you use the SATA interface and slot 2 you use the PCIe. So hopefully that didn't sound too confusing, but in a nutshell, just make sure that both of your hard drives are a PCIe interface, and that way you'll be safe on both slot 1 and slot 2 of the motherboard. So for power, I used a EVGA Supernova G3, and it is the 850 watt model. Not much to talk about here. That's a pretty good power supply from what I've heard. I haven't used any EVGA stuff in the past. I've mostly used Corsair, but great products so far from what I can tell and from what I've read on a lot of things. But And 850 watts is pretty sufficient for this setup here. I'm not running dual graphics cards, you know. The i7-8700K really isn't that power hungry. It's very efficient compared to some of the older Skylake and KB Lake stuff. So I'm really probably not even getting anywhere close. I did have all this stuff on PC Parts Picker. I forget what my total wattage was, but I had quite a bit of headroom. And I think even enough headroom if I wanted to add another graphics card, it was possible. Now on to the part you guys have probably been waiting for, water cooling components. So as far as my water blocks go, they're both from EK. I have the EK Velocity RGB for the CPU. And then I have the EK, it's the block for the 1080 Ti, and they have one for the Win 3 from EVGA. So that block is specifically for that PCB. And both of these water blocks are the nickel plated RGB models. I was really confused when I first started water cooling because I was very cognizant about mixing the metals, and I wanted to avoid that at all costs. But the further the research I did, I started to realize you're not going to completely avoid using different metals. So for instance, I have my water blocks they're both nickel plated, but definitely got to read the fine print on this stuff. Nickel plated, so I believe they are a copper base, but they have the nickel plated look just to, you know, have that silver look instead of the bronze color. But and then the radiators I used were two Slim Rads from EK. They're the Coolstream series. I have a 280 on the front, and then I have a 360 on top. This is another thing I noticed when I was reading the fine print of these radiators. It does say they have copper fins on the inside, and that kind of concerned me at first when I had nickel plated blocks. Didn't know if I was going to have some kind of compatibility issue there, but when I further read, it's okay to mix those, and it's just nickel plated. It's not a full nickel block, and even if it was, it would be okay because they aren't considered dissimilar metals. So the only one to really avoid is aluminum. You don't want to put aluminum radiators or any kind of aluminum parts in a build that has the other family of metals, which is like your nickel, your brass, copper. You don't want to mix aluminum in with that gang of metals. At least that's what I've learned from all the research I've done before I started buying stuff. Now your AIOs are aluminum radiators most of the time just because it's a lot cheaper, but I'm sure the companies have some sort of mix that they're putting in there, and it's very controlled what they're doing. So I wouldn't recommend it for DIY water cooling. And for the fittings, I use all my fittings are from Bits Power. I know a lot of people will say they're overpriced. They are very pricey fittings, but it comes with the quality that you're purchasing. They are high quality fittings, and I really think they do a lot of testing with these, and there's so many builds out there that have them. They're pretty tried and true, so I knew I wasn't going to get any issues there. And like I said, I think quality control, when it comes to those, you know, higher end manufacturers of fittings, they really test them and make sure the metals are consistent. That way you won't have any corrosion problems in your loop. So the tubing I used is rigid tubing. It is PETG tubing, and it's from Thermaltake, and it's the 16 millimeter outer diameter tubing, so a little bit bigger stuff, and I think it gave it a really cool look. And for the pump, I also went EK. I tried to stay in the same ecosystem of water cooling products as much as I could, except I did kind of stray away from it with the fittings, but that all turned out okay. I just made sure they were G1/4 and everything fits perfect. For the pump, we use the 140 Revo D5 pump, but that's a really good one from EK. It's easy to use because it's a pump res combo. It's all built in when you buy it. The only other thing you'll have to buy most of the time is some kind of mounting bracket, which I don't think is too expensive. I think it was like around $15. Or of course you could make some kind of custom mount. But that's a great pump. It's been in a lot of builds that I've watched on YouTube, and everybody seems to like it and haven't had any issues with it. So for the radiators, I use the EK Coolstream radiators. They're SE series. So this is the 280 box, as you can see. And I do have a 360 in the top of this build. Alrighty guys, and lastly I want to just take a moment to talk about performance as far as like temperatures. Frame rates are going to vary, and I'll probably do some different benchmark tests for a different video. But mainly talking about temperatures. So what kind of temperatures should you expect to get out of a water-cooled loop system like this one? So when it comes to temperatures with a water-cooled loop system, there's a lot of different variables. One of them being that your loop system as a whole does have a thermal limit. So with your amount of radiators, amount of fan cooling, you will get to a point of diminishing return where you just can't get the system any cooler, and that's because you've reached its thermal limit. And another thing to consider too is the ambient temperature of the room you have your PC in. So this room that we're in right now is usually between 76 and 78 degrees Fahrenheit. And my PC has been running usually around between 30 and 35 C at idle. At first I thought this was way too hot, but so your components are going to be generating heat no matter what, as long as your PC's turned on, of course. Whether you're at idle, gaming, video editing, your components are going to be generating heat. And it can vary. I mean, obviously when you're gaming and video editing, it's going to be a lot more. So having a PC run around room temperature is near impossible when thinking about it. If you have in my case, my PC runs around, I would say around 30 to 35 C, which 30 C I believe is around 86 Fahrenheit. So I mean, it's only approximately 10 degrees higher than the room temperature itself. So in the grand scheme of things, if your PC's running around 30 C in a room that's around 78 degrees Fahrenheit, that's really not bad. Alright guys, I think that's pretty much it. I think I covered everything in this build. If I left anything out, or you guys had any questions about any of those parts, feel free to drop a comment below. And I don't want to come across as any sort of expert when it comes to PC building or water cooling. I just want to explain to you what I did and the research I've done, so maybe it'll help you in your process. I hope it does. So give it a thumbs up if it does. I would greatly appreciate that. And if you guys want to see more content on PC building and other tech related stuff, be sure to subscribe. As always guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.